Business can be risky, but Nebraska is making it easier for startups to get off the ground.
Starting a business can be risky, and Nebraska is obviously making it easier for startups to get off the ground. But the program started a decade ago and has seen major progress, according to a new report. 6 News' Bella Caracta shows us just how much.
If it wasn't for the grant program, I probably never would have started Audit Miner, because I would have had to use my own funds, potentially mortgage my house, liquidate some 401k of my own in order to put money into there. And that's just not a risk that I'm willing to take as a mother of 3.
4 years ago, Kelly Mann took a leap, starting her own company. The Business Innovation Act made that leap a little less risky.
We started with just Kelly and I and hired development outsourced for that initially because we didn't feel comfortable hiring full-time employees. So then with the grant, it allowed us the flexibility of hiring internal people.
Now Audit Miner, based in downtown Omaha, has 13 employees. They help companies audit their 401ks. Mann used to be an auditor herself and saw an opportunity to automate the paperwork process. With the help of a $150,000 grant from the state, they created a prototype and turned it into a successful business. A new report by UNL shows the state is receiving a huge return on investment from the Business Innovation Act. For every dollar the state puts in, the companies see an average of more than $12 in revenue.
A lot of those businesses that we funded early on in that 2012 to 2015 space, they're growing by leaps and bounds, and they are, adding dozens or hundreds of people in some cases to their staff.
According to UNL's report, the program helped create more than 1,600 jobs since it started and brought in more than $16 million of state and local tax revenue last year alone.
Very difficult to hire quality staff, programmers and such. We're all competing for the same talent. So with that grant allowed us to have the funds to then hire some of the top talent.
Audit Miner is ready to stand entirely on its own 2 feet. With the help of grant money from the state, they no longer need another round of funding. On your side, in Omaha, Bella Caracta, 6 News.
And we're told there's a particular focus on technology product development in Nebraska. Applications for the Business Innovation Act can be found on our website, WOWT.com.